Hello listeners, this is Vidyadhar talking to you on a new video on meta model of Pragma Sophy. I would request you to have a good look at the diagram as it is pretty complex and we have to make references to this particular diagram when I talk. Okay, we will begin. Pragma Sophy is an extension of philosophy. In what way it is an extension is what is to be made clear in this particular video. We concentrate on three boxes which are shown here: the real world, the knowledge, and the enactments. These are the three boxes which form the three pillars of Pragma Sophy. At the outset, we can say that in conventional philosophy, the box named enactments is missing. That's the first change or first extension, to be precise, from philosophy to Pragma Sophy. There are other extensions which I will make an indication to while we go along. We know of three things: being, knowing, and doing. Now, we will see that when we have passed through one circle or iteration of being, knowing, and doing, we end up into something which is becoming where the real world changes. These changes in the real world are captured in the box shown below, which we call it as evolution. Evolution corresponds to the changes in the real world, event by event, recorded across time. This we call it as evolution. Probably the start point of the evolution was the Big Bang, and we really do not know what is going to be the end point, but some of the points which are what we call it as singularities are known to us. The first singularity being the Big Bang, the next singularity being what we call it as emergence of our Earth. The third singularity is emergence of life, and probably the fourth singularity is what we call it as conscious humans. Another singularity is lurking, and that is of bots. rBOTs, which are robots, and iBots, which are chatbots. As these are becoming intelligent, they are trying to compete with the position of humans. Now, this fact needs to be taken into account when we talk about any domain of knowledge which is an actionable domain. We have seen here that the relationship between real world and knowing is through experiencing, and the experiencing is done by an agent. I have shown the agent as a half man and a half robot to indicate that the current world is inhabited by these two particular agents. We move from knowledge to enactments by inferencing, and we move from enactments back to the real world through effectuations. Real world comprises of holons, which are nothing but entities which have parts and which are a part of a higher entity. The parts which belong to a holon, we call them as components. The parts which belong to the containers are the holons. Now, I have mentioned here two types of holons, the objects and the agents. The difference between them is that objects are passive objects governed only by physical laws, while agents are objects which have an internal structure, internal life, internal behavior, and also have an ability to adapt to the environment and also to change the environment. And the environment which it can adapt to is its internal world, and the environment which it can change is the real world. The changes which occur in the real world can be classified into two types of changes: nature influence change and the agent influence change. Nature influence changes are essentially like seasons, say for example, which are so much essential for human life, and agent influence changes have given us artifacts like instruments and gadgets. The box shown here, called as knowledge, has two components shown, the verity and the value. Let's have a look at verity in a little more detail. A verity consists of two parts, formal truths and empirical facts. Empirical facts correspond to the physical world, while truths correspond to formal world. Thus, a fact can be two objects in the world attract each other proportional to their masses, while a truth is something like root 2 is an irrational number. The knowledge box, which is shown here, also has a component which we call it as value. The value is also subdivided into two components: morals, which are very captive to human beings, and norms, which are followed by human beings as well as they are supposed to be followed by robots and iBots or chatbots. These correspond to what we call it as components of knowledge. The branches of Pragma Sophy, marked here as systemics and wisdomics, correspond to assigning verity to knowledge statements and assigning value to knowledge statements. As such, we can distinguish between knowledge snippets, which are nothing but atomic elements of knowledge, into two categories: the verity knowledge snippet and the value knowledge snippet. These together form what we call it as knowing. This is the process of knowing. Knowing, of course, is by an agent. That means the knowledge corresponds to the experiences of agents. These experiences can be a cognitive experience or a normative experience. It is important to note that these experiences can be had both by humans as well as by bots. If these experiences, essentially which are subjective in nature, when a lot of agents corroborate on these experiences, then it gets to something which we call it as a knowledge pool. and that is the objective knowledge that we have in the world. We call this as the knowledge pool of variety snippets and value snippets. In knowledge is the basis by which we move to something which we call it as enactments. Enactments consists of two parts, the decisions and the actions. Decisions correspond to conclusions which are drawn by inferences from the knowledge set which we have or the knowledge pool which we have. These inferences are drawn by processes like deductive reasoning, which asserts an individual fact from a general known fact, inductive reasoning, which extends a known fact to a more general fact, and abductive reasoning, which corresponds to creation of hypotheses which form the basis of a model, new model, and abductive reasoning is formation of hypothesis when the knowledge is incomplete. And this is the very essence of Pragma Sophy. In case of philosophy, it is presented as if it is a finished good, while Pragma Sophy is an evolving entity, and it will be based on the changes which take place in the real world and the reasons for these changes and how we can form the knowledge out of these changes, which to a certain extent is permanent. Enactment, as I said, consists of decisions, which is one part of it which is obtained by reasoning. The other part of enactments are actions. The actions correspond to something which is called as changes which are effectuated in the external world. Decisions can be further classified like verity we have done in facts and truths. We can classify decisions in terms of benevolent decisions and pragmatic decisions. The actions can also be classified into two categories, the tactical actions and the strategic actions. Tactical actions correspond to a short-term action, while strategic action makes a lasting impact on the changes. These are the actions, the strategic actions, which are essentially responsible for the evolution of the real world. To move from the box of enactments back to the real world, the agents has to do effectuations in the external world, as well as the agents can do some kinds of effectuations in the internal world, and when an effectuation is done only in the internal world of the agent, we call that as learning, which is a very essential process. And learning is not restricted only to humans, it is as well as practiced by the robots and chatbots. Learning is the key of using the knowledge and the reasoning to move towards benevolent changes in the real world. This completes one cycle of what we call it as moving from real world through experience to knowledge, and from inferences to enactments, and from enactments by actuations or effectuations to changes in the real world. And since the changes are taking place in the real world no more remains only being, but it is becoming. The Pragma Sophy differs from philosophy in several ways. One of the first thing that in which it changes or is different is that Pragma Sophy is a growing field. It is not a deadwood like philosophy. Second thing is Pragma Sophy takes into account that the real world now comprises not only of passive objects, animals and humans, but it also is inhabited by rBOTs and iBOTs. The third thing which is of importance is that the knowledge which we are talking about has now different types of components very clearly distinguished in truths and facts and morals and norms, and morals and norms correspond to the bots world as well as they also correspond to the human world. This is a big difference. The enactment is as a whole missing from Pragma Sophy, but is a essential part of Pragma Sophy. Enactments are missing from philosophy, but is a integral part of Pragma Sophy. Thus, Pragma Sophy is, we can, in short, two words we can say, Pragma Sophy is actionable knowledge. Thank you for joining me on this exciting video of what Pragma Sophy is, and if you have liked the video, I would request you to like it, and for more explorations of this kind, please also subscribe my channels. Thank you very much.